The orb of King James IV, a 15th century encounter with the unknown. Good evening. You are watching Space, the final frontier above and beyond an open-minded channel. Tonight we are looking into King James IV of Scotland and his encounter with what he called a spiritual apparition. Based on his beliefs and education at the time, this was the only option he had for explaining what they saw on that day. What caught our attention was the description of the event and the many witnesses that were with him when the encounter took place. So kick back and relax as we look back in time with a modern perspective. This story is in no way meant to take away from King James' beliefs. It is for entertainment only, and of course, open-minded people. 15th century Scotland. Rugged highlands stretching as far as the eye can see, mist clinging to the valleys, and at the center of it all, a king. King James IV of Scotland, a monarch known for his ambition, his intellect, and his fascination with the unseen, the mystical, and the spiritual. But even a king, no matter how learned, could not have prepared for what was about to confront him. Imagine this, a procession winding through the ancient lands, horses clattering across stone-strewn paths, nobles in rich robes, servants carrying banners, and James IV himself, mounted proudly, his eyes scanning the horizon. Suddenly a light appeared, not a torch, not the sun, not a reflection in the clouds, a bright pulsating light hovering above the rugged landscape. It moved with intention, graceful, deliberate. Across hills between rocks it glided, and then it descended, right before the king and his entourage. It was a glowing orb, the size of a carriage wheel, suspended in the air, radiating warmth. It hummed, a low, tuneful vibration that resonated in the bones, filling the air with a sound that was both alien and strangely comforting. The court fell silent. Horses stirred nervously. Men whispered, unsure whether to flee or to bow. James IV, despite the awe and fear, approached. He extended his hand, curious, fearless, perhaps hoping to touch what no man had ever touched. And in that instant, the orb shot upward, a streak of light across the sky. Gone. The warm hum faded. Silence returned. Yet in that brief encounter, the king knew he had seen something extraordinary, something beyond comprehension. Historical grounding. To understand the weight of this moment, we must understand James IV himself. Born in 1473, he would ascend the Scottish throne as a young man, ruling with intelligence, ambition, and a keen interest in knowledge beyond the ordinary. James IV was a king of contrasts, a warrior and a scholar, a lover of art, science, and philosophy. He commissioned the building of bridges, churches, and palaces. He spoke multiple languages and collected books and instruments. Yet he was also fascinated by the mystical. Alchemy, astrology, prophecy. He believed that the unseen world held truths just as real as those visible to the eye. In a time when kings often relied on divination, priests and soothsayers, James IV sought knowledge from all realms, the physical and the metaphysical. And it was during one of these journeys across his kingdom that he encountered the orb, a phenomenon that would challenge his understanding, his beliefs, and perhaps even the laws of nature itself. The orb encounter. Let us return to that fateful day. The royal procession wound its way through a narrow valley, its cliffs glowing gold in the afternoon sun. The air was crisp, touched with the scent of heather and damp earth, and the rhythmic clatter of hooves echoed against stone walls that had stood since time immemorial. Banners fluttered in the breeze, crimson and gold, bearing the lion rampant of Scotland. Trumpets sounded occasionally, announcing the king's presence to villages ahead. James IV rode at the head of the column, his armor glinting in the sunlight, his mind half lost in thought, on matters of state, of faith, of science and spirit. Around him, his guards and nobles rode proudly, the greatest men of Scotland assembled in a single, glittering march. Then the world changed. Without warning, the air grew still. The wind ceased. The birds fell silent. The steady march of hooves slowed as every head turned skyward. A light, faint at first, began to pulse high above the ridge. It shimmered once, twice, and then expanded, glowing brighter, until it was impossible to ignore. The men shielded their eyes. Some crossed themselves instinctively. It wasn't lightning, nor the reflection of the sun. This was something alive, a sphere of pure light that pulsed as though it breathed. The orb drifted down gracefully, hovering above the rocky ground no more than 50 paces from the king. The horses snorted and reared. Armor clattered. Soldiers shouted for order. But James IV raised his hand, and silence fell again. "Hold fast," he commanded. And they did. For in that moment, fear and reverence had fused into one. The orb glowed brighter. A soft hum rolled through the air, low and melodic, like the tone of a cathedral bell heard from far away. The light cast long shadows across the valley walls, painting faces in gold and silver. Witnesses later swore that the warmth could be felt from yards away, not a burning heat, but a living warmth, as though the sun itself had drawn close to the earth. The men stared, transfixed. Some whispered prayers under their breath. Others dared not speak at all. One knight would later confess that tears filled his eyes, though he could not explain why. Only that the light stirred something deep within his soul. The orb hovered there, silent, observant, almost curious. It shifted slightly as if acknowledging the presence of the king. James IV dismounted, his armor creaking softly as his boots touched the earth. His guards tried to stop him, but he waved them back. Alone he walked toward the glowing sphere. Every step echoed in the quiet valley. The orb pulsed brighter, its rhythm matching the slow beat of a human heart. The hum deepened, not mechanical, not thunderous, but harmonious, almost musical. The men said it was like the sound of 100 voices singing a single tone, perfectly in tune with the universe. The air shimmered. James IV raised his hand, his face illuminated by the golden light. The orb seemed to respond, lowering slightly, its edges blurring, as though inviting his touch. Then, it rose. Slowly at first, then faster, a spiral of light ascending into the sky, leaving trails that shimmered like ribbons of molten gold. The hum intensified for a heartbeat, then cut off in an instant. The orb streaked upward, a blinding flash, and vanished into the blue. Silence. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, all at once, the murmurs began. Knights removing helmets, priests crossing themselves, soldiers whispering, "What have we witnessed?" Some said it was the hand of God. Others, an angel descending to bless the king. A few murmured of sorcery, of signs and portents. But none, not one among the hundreds who stood there, doubted what they had seen. That day, under the cold Scottish sun, an army bore witness to a mystery beyond their comprehension. And James IV, a man of faith, science, and courage, carried the vision of that glowing orb with him for the rest of his days. He would speak of it rarely, and only to those he trusted most. But among the soldiers and nobles who stood in that valley, the tale would spread like wildfire, whispered in taverns, repeated in courts, and passed through generations as the day the heavens opened before a king. The king's interpretation. James IV was a man of faith and intellect, yet faced with the impossible, he turned to what he knew best, interpretation through the lens of his time. He told his court it was a spiritual apparition, a message from the heavens, perhaps a warning, perhaps a sign of divine favor, or even a portent of the fate awaiting him. But I have to ask, would you expect him to say it was a UFO? Of course not. He was going to call it exactly what he and everyone before him were taught, and that is it was either a spiritual righteous or evil demonic apparition. After all, they had no idea that UFOs even existed, and if they did, I wonder if they could comprehend what a UFO really was. Historians note that he was rarely shaken by superstition, but this luminous presence challenged even his understanding. For a king who studied the cosmos, sought the counsel of alchemists, and listened to prophecies, the orb was a mystery that could not be confined to parchment, prophecy, or sermon. Court gossip and legend. The story spread quickly through the court. Whispered conversations in candlelit halls, nobles exchanging uneasy glances, priests debating whether it was angel or omen, alchemists scribbling notes feverishly. Some claimed the king had touched the very hand of a spirit. Others whispered darker theories. a test from powers beyond human understanding. And though the orb itself vanished, the tale endured. Years later, courtiers would recount the day when James IV approached a glowing, humming sphere and saw the impossible with his own eyes. It became a legend, a story told by generations, embroidered with awe, fear, and wonder. A story that whispered across the highlands and castles, from Edinburgh to Linlithgow, passed down through those who knew that the king had glimpsed something that defied the world as they knew it. Modern perspective. And today, we can look at this tale through a very different lens. The glowing orb, the warmth in the air, the low harmonic hum, the graceful ascent. These are all consistent with descriptions of modern UFO encounters. UFO researchers note that many close encounters feature luminous spheres or orbs, audible humming or tuneful vibrations, sensations of warmth or energy radiating from the object, sudden rapid acceleration and stops, sudden rapid ascent into the sky. Could King James IV have witnessed such an encounter? A close encounter, centuries before modern records? The similarities are striking. The sensory details, the behavior of the orb, the king's awe and uncertainty, all mirror what thousands of witnesses report even today. Perhaps for a moment, the king had glimpsed a visitor from beyond our world, or perhaps he had seen something entirely natural, misunderstood by the lens of his time. Either way, the encounter reminds us that the world is larger, stranger, and more mysterious than even the wisest of us can comprehend. Closing reflection. Of course, there is another way to see this story. The tale of the glowing orb is, in large part, a modern interpretation of James IV's legends. Medieval chronicles spoke of spectral figures, prophetic visions, and omens. Over centuries, the stories of apparitions, warnings, and otherworldly signs have been reimagined, reinterpreted, and retold in the language of our own era. The era of UFOs, satellites, and space exploration. And yet, therein lies the wonder. Even if the orb was never a literal UFO, it captures the essence of how humans have always confronted the unknown. It shows us that history is full of mysteries, that perception is filtered by time, culture, and understanding. Imagine just for a moment a king in the 15th century standing before a light that defied all explanation, sensing warmth, hearing a hum, and witnessing the impossible. Whether divine or extraterrestrial, whether legend or truth, the encounter reminds us that the unknown has always walked among us, and perhaps still does. And so, the story of James IV and the glowing orb endures, not just as a tale of Scotland's history, but as a reminder. When we peer into the skies, when we encounter the unexplainable, we are standing at the same threshold that a king once stood at, centuries ago, in a land of mist and mystery, wondering what truly lies beyond our understanding. In conclusion, Earth's history is full of spiritual apparition stories. This is just one of many that we looked into. If you have enjoyed this story of King James IV of Scotland, then like and subscribe so you won't miss the next time we look back in history. Till next time, keep your mind open and your eyes focused on what lies above and beyond. Thanks for watching.